$200,000. Look at that number. Really look at it. For most people, that is not just a balance. It is a decade of missed dinners. It is the vacation you didn't take. It is the 2015 sedan you're still driving while your neighbors are leasing SUVs that cost more than your first house. It is the physical manifestation of every time you said no, so that one day you could finally say yes. But here is the cold, hard truth that nobody wants to tell you when you finally cross that line. $200,000 is the most dangerous amount of money you will ever own. At $10,000, you were focused. At $50,000, you were hungry. At $100,000, you felt like you'd finally arrived. But at $200,000, you enter a psychological dead zone where more wealth is lost to subtle, invisible mistakes than was ever earned through hard work. It is the point where the math changes, but your brain hasn't caught up yet. If you handle the next 12 months correctly, this $200,000 becomes the gravity well that pulls in the rest of your financial freedom. If you handle it like 90% of people do, you will wake up 5 years from now with the same balance, wondering where the momentum went. Before we pull back the curtain on the 7 specific traps waiting to swallow your progress, I want to ask you something. If you've hit a milestone, whether it's 10,000 or 200,000, drop a comment below and just say, "I'm in the game." There is something powerful about acknowledging your progress in a community of people who actually get it. While you're down there, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that deep dive financial logic matters more than clickbait, and it ensures that this community keeps growing. And if you haven't subscribed yet, ask yourself if you're ready to stop guessing and start executing. Join us. Let's build this together. Now, let's talk about Sarah. Sarah is 38. She's a project manager, she's disciplined, and 3 weeks ago, she hit the $200,000 mark in her combined accounts. She expected to feel like she was standing on top of a mountain. Instead, she felt like she was standing on a tightrope. Suddenly, the buy and hold strategy that felt so safe at $50,000 feels reckless. A 10% market dip used to mean she lost $5,000. Now it means she loses $20,000 in a single Tuesday. That is a year of her contributions wiped out while she's eating lunch. This is where the first mistake begins, the survival pivot. When you have $200,000, your brain stops thinking about how to win and starts obsessing over how not to lose. You start looking at your index funds like they're a ticking time bomb. You hear a headline about a recession, or a market expert on the news predicts a 40% crash, and suddenly, that boring, reliable portfolio feels too exposed. So you do what feels like the responsible thing. You move $50,000 into cash just to wait for things to settle down. You tell yourself you'll buy back in when the coast is clear. But the coast is never clear. You just traded a temporary fluctuation for a permanent loss of momentum. You've taken the engine out of the car while you're trying to drive uphill. This is mistake number 1, treating your wealth like a fragile glass sculpture instead of the heavy-duty power tool it actually is. At $200,000, your money has finally developed a voice. It's finally big enough to do the heavy lifting for you. But it can't work if it's sitting in a savings account earning 4% while inflation and missed gains are eating 8%. The second mistake is more subtle. It's what I call the "I've made it" mirage. There is a psychological phenomenon where once you hit a significant number, you subconsciously give yourself permission to stop tracking the small things. When you were building your first $20,000, you knew exactly what your grocery bill was. You knew when a subscription went up by $3. But at $200,000, you start feeling like those small amounts are beneath you. You start rounding up your lifestyle. You get the nicer trim on the new car because what's another $40 a month when I have $200,000? You stop packing the lunch. You start saying yes to the expensive dinners without checking the menu. This isn't about being a miser. It's about the fact that your savings rate is still the most important variable in your life. Most people think $200,000 is the finish line. It's not. It's the halfway point to the halfway point. If you let your lifestyle expand now, you are effectively capping your wealth at its current level. You are choosing a slightly better now in exchange for a significantly worse forever. Let's look at the math, because the math doesn't have emotions. If you have $200,000 and you stop contributing because you've decided to live a little and that money grows at 7% for 20 years, you end up with about $770,000. That sounds okay until you realize that if you had just kept contributing a modest $500 a month, the same discipline that got you here, you would have over $1.5 million. That little bit of lifestyle creep literally cost you $800,000. It is the most expensive dinner you will ever eat. Mistake number 3 is the complexity trap. Once you have real money, people start coming out of the woodwork with sophisticated ideas. You start thinking that simple index funds are for beginners. You start looking at individual stock picking, or complex option strategies, or exclusive private equity deals your buddy's cousin mentioned. You feel like a $200,000 portfolio deserves a $200,000 strategy. But the truth is, the most successful investors in the world are the ones who can stay bored the longest. The advanced moves are usually just ways for middlemen to take a cut of your growth. When you add complexity, you add points of failure, you add tax drag, you add management fees, and most importantly, you add the need for you to be right. At $200,000, you don't need to be right about the next tech stock. You just need the S&P 500 to keep being the S&P 500. The fourth mistake is the one that keeps people in the middle class forever, the tax ignorance tax. When you had $20,000, your tax strategy didn't really matter. Whether your money was in a brokerage account or a Roth IRA, the difference was a few $100. But at $200,000, taxes are your single biggest competitor. If you have $200,000 in a standard brokerage account and it's throwing off dividends and capital gains, you are paying the government every single year for the privilege of owning that money. If that same $200,000 was structured across a Roth IRA, a 401k, and an HSA, the difference in your final net worth could be the cost of an entire house. Most people at this stage are still focused on, how much am I making? The people who actually get wealthy are focused on, how much am I keeping? If you aren't thinking about asset location, putting your high-growth, tax-heavy assets in tax-advantaged buckets, you are essentially giving the IRS a 20% tip on your hard work. Mistake 5 is the real estate itch. This is where you see your $200,000 and you think, I should buy a rental property. You've watched the videos, you've seen the passive income gurus, and you want to be a mogul. So you take $100,000 of your liquid, easy-to-manage, diversified wealth, and you dump it into a single physical building in one specific neighborhood. Suddenly, you aren't an investor anymore. You're a property manager. You've traded a liquid asset that grows while you sleep for an illiquid asset that calls you at 2 a.m. because a toilet is overflowing. More importantly, you've concentrated your risk. If that neighborhood goes downhill, or a major employer leaves, or a tenant decides to stop paying, half of your net worth is under siege. Real estate can be a great tool, but using your first $200,000 to buy a single-family rental is often just a high-stress hobby disguised as a strategy. The sixth mistake is the safety net hole. At $200,000, your biggest asset isn't actually the money. It's your ability to keep earning and contributing. Yet this is the stage where people get overconfident and stop protecting their downside. They have a $200,000 portfolio, but only a $5,000 emergency fund. They assume that if things go wrong, they can just pull from their investments. But things usually go wrong when the market is down. If you lose your job during a recession and you have to sell your stocks when they're down 30% just to pay your mortgage, you have just committed financial suicide. Your emergency fund isn't just for emergencies. It's an insurance policy for your portfolio. It's the moat that protects the castle. Without a robust 6-month cash cushion that is completely separate from your $200,000, you are gambling, not investing. And finally, mistake number 7, the comparison poison. At $200,000, you are doing better than about 90% of the population. But you don't look at the 90%. You start looking at the people who have $500,000 or $1 million. You start feeling like you're behind. This leads to performance chasing. You see someone making 50% on a crypto coin or a specific AI stock, and you feel like your 8% index fund return is a failure. You start taking bigger risks to catch up to a finish line that you've completely made up in your head. This is how people go from $200,000 back to $50,000. They try to turn a great start into a fast finish, and they end up crashing the car. So, how do you avoid these traps? How do you become the person who turns $200,000 into a legacy? It starts with the Richard strategy we discussed earlier. You simplify. You automate. You realize that your job right now isn't to be a genius. It's to be a machine. You ensure your tax buckets are optimized. You maximize your HSA, that triple tax-advantaged secret weapon that most people ignore. You check your insurance, umbrella policies, and disability insurance, because now you actually have something worth taking. And then, you do the hardest thing in the world, nothing. You let the math of compounding take over. At $200,000 at an 8% return, your money is now making $16,000 a year on its own. That is more than a lot of people make working part-time. In a few years, that $16,000 becomes $32,000, then $64,000. You are currently building a person made of gold who will eventually work so you don't have to. Don't fire that person today because you got bored or scared. If this breakdown helped you see the hidden dangers in your own path, do me a favor. Share this with one person who is also on the grind. Wealth building is a lonely game, and having someone to keep you accountable, someone who understands why you're still driving the old car despite the balance in your account, is the ultimate viral factor for your personal success. Remember, $200,000 isn't just a number, it's a test. It's the test of whether you can handle success without letting it change your discipline. It's the test of whether you can be quiet while everyone else is being loud. The noise of the market, the noise of your neighbors, and the noise of your own fear will try to get you to move. Your only job is to stay still. Keep the main thing the main thing. Keep your costs low, your savings high, and your vision long. You've done the hard part. You've built the fire. Now, just stop pouring water on it. Think about where you want to be in 10 years. Do you want to be the person telling the story of how they once had $200,000 but lost it in a bad deal? Or do you want to be the person who quietly retired a multimillionaire because they had the courage to be boring when it mattered most? The choice isn't made in 10 years. It's made today. It's made in the next 5 minutes when you decide whether to stick to the plan or chase the shine. Stay disciplined. Keep building. And I'll see you at the next milestone.